Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, your resource for all things business, brand, and leadership. We are excited you have decided to join us today.
Hey guys, welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I am your host, Robert Kaelin, here again with my good friend, Mike Newman. Mike, good to have you.
See you guys again. Great to be back.
This is awesome. So I am so pumped for today because communication, as you guys know, is a huge part of life. We get to be blessed to have our friend who is a passionate communicator. He is really passionate about holistic communication as well and loves stories. In fact, he probably should have been a comedian because he's hilarious. And I love this guy. I want to introduce to you guys speaker, trainer, and coach from Speak with People, Mr. Jason Raitz. Jason, good to have you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for letting me be here. And thank you so much for that really kind and honoring introduction.
Absolutely. So, today we're talking about communication. We're talking about that. But Jason, before we get there, we need to just know who you are. So what's your backstory? How did you get to where you are right now?
Absolutely. Well, I am someone who absolutely loves to use the power of words to encourage, to bring hope, to lift up. Even as a young kid, I just love to help people laugh, not make people laugh, but help them laugh. And so I do that through stories. I would do that through, somewhat of entertainment. But everything changed for me when I was 11 years old. My parents took me to my first rock concert, and we went to this rock and roll concert of this band called Res Band back in the 80s. I want to say
Band. Okay, you and I know that, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we go back, and at the very end of the concert, the lead singer, the whole time, everyone's it's loud and everything is a mess, and then he starts talking at the very end. And as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, I just looked around and realized everybody was dialed in. It went from loud and everybody moving to quiet and everybody engaged. And I watched this lead singer, Glenn Kaiser's his name, and he shared his story. He shared a story about his life had been changed. And at the end, he gave an opportunity for people to know more about how, his life was changed through a relationship with God. And so he gave an opportunity for that. And that night rocked my little 10, 11-year-old because I went home and thought, that's what I want to do. I want to, not so much the leather pants and the rock, even though I had time in a rock band. I loved it, but just the power of communication. So the next day, my dad was a carpenter. We always had tools and stuff around. I went in our basement and I built a stage and kind of put it together. Went to all my neighborhood friends and said, hey, if you come listen to me talk on my stage, you'll get my mom's world famous chocolate chip cookies. And so still to this day, I love my mother. She still has some of the cassette tapes of my talks in, 84 or 85 of me standing on the stage communicating to my friends. Since that point, I have just loved the power of communication and how it can drastically change people's lives. If it's used in a healthy way, it can. And it can also change people's lives if it's used in an unhealthy way. So that, in a nutshell, I am someone who values, loves the art of communicating. And so on the other side, been married to my wife, Tracy, since 97. We have 5 kids, 24 all the way down to 10. 3 of them have a rare genetic disorder. And then 2 of them have autism. So we're really, really passionate about the rare disease community and autism. And then our 5th was adopted from China. And so real passionate about the adoption community. The only other thing I think people need to know about me is that I am Hootie and the Blowfish's #1 fan. Like I will always, I just will always be. You cannot convince me there is not a greater rock band. So.
And you've been following Darius Rucker around in his country music stuff as well, right?
Absolutely. I grew up in Detroit, and so I wasn't allowed to listen to country music. And so, Darius rocked my world when he went into the country world, because I was like, wait a minute, what am I going to do? But now, all these years later, my friends, of 20, 30 years, they call me out on it. But I'm a full-fledged. I go to country shows. I listen to Luke Combs and Morgan
Yep.
Wallen, Darius Rucker. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I was reading a book recently by an author who you probably know. In fact, you've probably read this book before, called The 16 Invaluable Laws of Communication, or 16 Undeniable Laws of Communication by John Maxwell.
Yes.
And in it, he talks about this idea of having two messages, that we always have two messages. One is the message for the moment, which is like whatever you're talking about right now. Today, we're talking on a podcast, but you have another message, which he calls your big message, which is, as I was kind of processing through that section of it, is the culture that comes out from who you are as a person and what how you care for people. And, you've got this Speak with People business, which is a podcast. It's coaching, it's training. There's so many aspects to it. But what is your big message? I know that totally like puts you on the spot question.
No, I love it. My big message is this. We live in a world today where people are bombarded with communication. I mean, their phones are always going off. We're always watching videos. We're always being communicated. And so many people just want to be heard. Like they're just looking for someone to listen to them. They're looking for, wait a minute, why can't my voice be heard? Why can't and they shy away then. Or if they don't shy away, maybe sometimes they go to the exact opposite and they get super loud or forceful. And so my big message is, if you really want to be a leader who leaves an indelible mark in your world, and dare I say even the world, you've really got to elevate the importance and practice of healthy communication in your life. And you can do that by speaking with people, not at them. Speaking with people, not at them. Because more and more, I mean, people are just used to people speaking at them. I mean, if you go to the comments online, I mean, it's like dumpster fires. I mean, it's just, wow, people are so rude and arrogant. I mean, you watch the news I'm convinced, doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or independent. I am almost convinced across the board, they all just speak at people. I'm like, just somebody, like, let's just have a conversation without like calling out names and, doing all this kind of stuff. We're just used, if we don't like our service at Five Guys, we go on to Yelp and we leave this nasty review. And so my challenge to people is, hey, instead of living that type of lifestyle, speak with people, which is not just about words, because communication is only 7% words. I mean, it's so much more about how you live your life and your body tone, your language, and all that kind of stuff. So, the speak with people really for us is, if you really want to build trust with people, you want to deepen connections with them. So your voice will be heard. You'll hear their voice. It's just this beautiful process. You can do that by caring about those communication skills. Yeah, I love Maxwell's book there. For us, we like to say at Speak with People, we want to empower leaders to become healthy and influential communicators. Because again, the great John Maxwell said, leadership is influence. And I personally think, I 100% agree with that. But I think how you communicate is how you steward the level of influence that you'll have. And so if you communicate in ineffective ways, your influence is going to shrink. If you communicate in negative ways, you probably will get some influence, right? Because people love, watching, right? But if you communicate in healthy ways, you communicate with people, boy, your influence will expand. People will trust you. They'll keep coming back. So especially for business, I do a lot of corporate trainings where we teach leaders how to do just that, to build that trust and deepen those connections. And it's through communication. And so it's all built on this with or at philosophy. And so with is healthy communication, at is unhealthy communication. When you think of at, you think of like a vampire, right? Sucking the life out of someone. when I communicate with them, you think of like an oxygen tank. I'm breathing life into them. And I think communication is something that we just take for granted because we do it all day long. I mean, there's research that says we probably communicate up to 2/3 of our day. And so I think it's a lot like breathing. We take it for granted until we have a respiratory infection or something goes wrong. And then we're like, wait a minute. It's the same thing with communication. We need to slow down for a minute and go, okay, how am I communicating? Am I communicating in a way that breathes life into people, lifts them up, encourages them, tells the truth? And so, yeah, we developed this assessment around knowing, okay, am I communicating in a healthy way? Am I communicating in an unhealthy way? And then especially with our one-on-one relationships, we have 10 healthy habits of a communicator. And like you said, so few of them are actually about the words you use. The first one is actually to assess and prioritize your health, because if your inner world is not healthy, what comes out is not going to be healthy. So, that's that's my communication spiel in a nutshell, because I just think, yes, leaders, if you own a business, if you're in sales and you're meeting with people, those communication skills are just going to exponentially grow your influence. But even in your home, if you learn how to do this, the relationship with your spouse, relationship with your children, it will do nothing but flourish, because it's just, that's what that healthy value does. That's the return on investment for building some of those skills.
So Jason, you kind of talked about one of the things I was going to ask, which is about, we think we communicate well. We think we give really clear, concise directions about something, and then we get it back and it's completely different than what we thought. And over time, I've learned that I need to, be a better communicator myself. And when things don't go right, I look at what did I do to contribute to that, or what didn't I do to contribute to that. But how could you help our listeners maybe that have that as a struggle? As I think I give clear directions, yet it's not always coming back the way that I want it to. What would be some ways that they could maybe further communicate, or some tools they could use maybe to help them in getting some greater clarity?
Oh, such a great question. And I think it goes back to baseball, right? We were talking off camera about baseball. And so, I think Ted Williams is attributed with it, but he said the toughest thing in all of sports is to hit a baseball. I mean, you got 60 feet, 6 inches, you got half a second to be able to decide. It's the same in communication, because all at once, 3 things are happening. And this is research from Alan Hunkins, but he says that successful communication is like getting a ringer in horseshoes. Remember before pickleball and before, what's the one where you throw the bags? Cornhole. Yeah. We had horseshoes, right? We did horseshoes at parties. And if you threw one horseshoe and hit the ringer, okay, that's huge. But communication is the equivalent of getting 3 ringers in a row. Like 3 things are happening. You've got the message, the sender, and the receiver. And so each of those rings and the horseshoe, like you got to send the information, and then there's actually what you meant to say is happening, and then what they hear. So it's not an easy process. So you acknowledge that it's great. And leaders, if they go, okay, I got to make sure I do this. I think there's a couple of skills that people can learn. One is, you've got to become the Yoda of asking great questions. You have to care so much about questions, and you got to be done with boring questions, especially in client relationships. How's your day going? Oh, like don't waste time on that. I don't mean to point, so much finger at that question, but, ask it, a question of like, instead of asking where do you live, ask the question, how do you feel about where you live? Go to those type of great questions. I do a lot of training with financial advisors. And so they're sitting down with clients trying to get inside of their story. So ask questions of like, hey, in 5 years, if you could dream of what your life wants to look like, what would it look like? Well, how can I help you get there? So I think one of the skills is just learning how to ask those really great questions. And if you need help with that, there's great books. Vanessa Van Edwards wrote an incredible book called Cues, and she takes you all through there. If you're an introvert, she helps you learn how to, ask fellow introvert questions and extrovert questions. But it's just this amazing, opportunity. And then kind of another skill is, we have to take our listening to the next level. I actually did a podcast earlier today with, I don't know if you guys have Truist Bank out by you guys. It might be only on this side, but he is the head of sales for their wealth services. And he's saying, hey, we've done so much work training our people in the technology and the actual skills of knowing about annuities and 401ks that we've missed training them in listening, because especially moving forward, we're so technology. People still want and are craving that one-on-one engagement. So knowing how to listen, at a next level type thing is going to do nothing but give you, absolute great success. And then one other skill, I'll just give you one more. My mentor taught me this. I've known him since I went to college 30 years ago, but he finishes every phone call with the question, is there anything I said that you need clarity on? And I'm like, oh, wow. I was like, okay, that's a good question. And then if we decided something together, he'll say, okay, am I correct to say we decided I'm going to send you this by Friday, you're going to get me that by Thursday? So it's just that crystal clear clarity, question conversation, even at the end of the conversations, to go, okay, we're on the same page. Because there's nothing worse. I was interviewing an actor and a comedian for my podcast, the Speak with People podcast. And he was talking about how when he works with clients, he wants them to be able to figure out, like, hey, if there's two people in a boat and you're both rowing, there's nothing worse than if you're both rowing opposite, because you're going to go nowhere. And that's exactly what's happening, in the conversations where, we may not know, especially if you have to say things like, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So, being ahead of the curve and knowing and improving some of those practical skills, will bring some of that crystal clear clarity. I love what Dr. Brene Brown says. Kindness is clarity. People are searching for clarity. They don't want to go, well, I think they were telling me they love me. I think they were saying yes to the sale, but I'm not quite sure. So that's a couple of the skills that I would add to that.
Those are all great.
That's perfect with that 3 parts of the communication, with the sender, the receiver, and the message, and then circling back to say, hey, did the message get through the way that I wanted it to, with those, anything I said you need clarity on, or summing up the conversation. I think so oftentimes we're in such a hurry to move to the next thing that we don't summarize that part about what action am I going to take? What action are you going to take? Have that really clear. So thank you, Jason, for that. That's some nuggets there for you guys.
I know. I would add one more thing, especially as a business leader. If you have to do performance reviews, one of the things I learned years ago is when I actually type things out, right? I'm more fierce. I'm more honest. I think things through. And so when I actually sit down with someone, sometimes I'll maybe hold back, because I look at what I wrote and I was like, oh, wow. Like, okay, now the humanity side of it, I'm sitting face to face. And so even to this day, even when I had more of a robust team, right now my team's just a few people, but in the past when I had 20, 30, 40 staff that I oversaw, I would still type it out and I would sit down with them with the printed version. And then afterwards I would give them the printed version. So one, I didn't hold anything back, not so that I could be, more flagrant with my, you need to get better, all that kind of stuff. But just, I think sometimes we hold back from some of the challenge and the truth that leaders need to hear. Like, hey, boy, Robert, you have this way of really frustrating some of our coworkers because, you say things like this. Well, nobody's ever pointed it out to him. So that's just another clarity point that I was like, okay, that brought me a lot of great help. to type it out, read it out loud, and then edit it, and then, actually read from it when I sat down with them. Because then it was like, okay, now I'm actually sharing, I'm actually communicating what I'm thinking. But, in case that I sit down and go, well, I'll just give them 60% of this.
That's great. And I just want to point out that, it's interesting. It seems like it's become a thing on the Elevate podcast to always call Robert out for all of his stuff.
And Mike asked lots of great questions.
But no, in all seriousness, I love what you said, because we operate at this really fine line between truth and grace, right? That we have to speak the truth, but we also have to have grace for where someone's at. And so meeting them in that place is such a hard thing to do. So I love the idea of typing it out and recognizing in yourself that maybe you're a little harsher, a little bit more on the truth side, but then bringing the humanity to it and saying, hey, there are some things that, you could grow in. And so let's meet here in this middle and walk this fine line. That's something that's really hard to do. But I love it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Jason, we're wrapping this episode up. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Absolutely. Your voice matters. I think sometimes, again, Vanessa Van Edwards calls them the gremlins. There's these voices in our head that's like, don't post that video. Don't try to start something new. Don't dream bigger for your business. But those just aren't true. Your voice matters, and your world actually needs to hear your voice. And so when you go to use your voice, ask yourself, is my communication healthy or unhealthy? Because when you are communicating in healthy ways, you're speaking with people. Yes, not only you're going to be effective, but you're going to speak to them in such a way that they're going to remember those moments. And even though words make up only 7% of communication, the phrases, the words that are said to us, either in a challenge moment, in a pain moment, in an encouragement moment, we remember for a lifetime. So don't shy away from sharing those things. If you think of a word of encouragement to share with your employee and you're like, they know how I feel. No, share it. Send them a handwritten card. Just take those extra steps to make sure that you're, modeling, as much healthy communication as you can. Because I've just found through my life, everything exponentially changes when you communicate in healthy ways.
So good. So good. You guys, if you want to get a hold of Jason and speak with people, listen, he's going to give you that right now.
Absolutely. Our website is speakwithpeople.com. Has all of the information about our organization on there. Our podcast, Speak with People podcast as well, is on there. We have a weekly blog where we want to help you be a holistic, what we call a 4X communicator. So a leader who's growing their communication skills and their influence by speaking with people, that's one-on-one, by their team communication, which we call lead with people, by their stage or presentation skills, present with people, or because so much of us are communicating online, like we're doing right now, our online communication skills. So all that information is there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Jason, Raitz. So thank you so much.
Love it. You guys, I hope this episode has encouraged you. I know it's encouraged me. I know that it's got me to think about some things that I'm going through personally right now. And so write notes, take notes, listen to this again, share it with somebody that you love who could use this message today. And Jason, it's been awesome. You guys, we will see you on the next episode. Until then, take care. God bless.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Our hope is this episode has been helpful for you today. If it's impacted you in some way, we encourage you to share it with someone. To receive a direct notification of our next episode, click the follow button on your favorite app or platform. You can also watch each episode on YouTube. The links are in the description. If you want to connect with us on a deeper level, go to countercultureleadership.com/resources. We'll see you next week on the Elevate Podcast.